Hello, my name is Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm talking about trusting life. I would say that by and large, most people have a pretty deep mistrust of life, the world, others, pretty much everything. It may not be all that conscious, but on a deep fundamental level, we've learned to not trust. I mean, if you look at children, very young children in particular, are pretty trusting right out of the bat. You know, a child sees no problem with walking or bike riding by themselves to the park. But it is the adults that say it's dangerous and train and condition them otherwise, that the world is something to be feared, that life is something to be feared. And as we've acquired these conditioning, and some of it is experiential because, you trust and sometimes you're injured. And so through kind of an overreaction of our own experience, never again will I be injured, so, shutting down that avenue. As we grow up between that and the conditioning, we get very mistrustful. We don't trust life in the world. And I don't think that needs to be that way. I would say that after awakening, enlightenment, liberation, pick your term, there ends up being a profound trust in life, in the world, in others even. This is not being naive. It's not like there's a belief that if I trust, nothing bad will ever happen to me. When my daughter was young, she once asked me about trusting others. And she asked me if I trust everybody. And I said, yeah, I trust everybody. That's kind of my stance. And she says, well, what if you get hurt? And my response was, I know I'm going to be hurt. You can't go from the standpoint of, well, I'll never be hurt. And so I told her, I said in my experience, less than 1 out of 100 really will hurt you if you trust them. Most people are fairly trustworthy. In my life, I find, my coworkers, my bosses, my neighbors, my family, all pretty trustworthy in terms of I don't need to fear them. I don't need to be worried about what they're going to do to me. And so I'm able to trust them. But let's say 1 out of 100 does something to harm me. Does it make sense to not trust the 99 and treat them with fear and suspicion because the one harms you? It is an interesting question to delve into for yourself. Because for me, I find it's not worth punishing for all intents and purposes the 99 for what the one might do. And so my stance is I trust, knowing, not naively, knowing full well, eventually I'm going to get stung by this. I will be injured by this. Case in point, when I was still living in Minnesota, I had a neighbor who did small engine and machinery repair, things like that. And my chainsaw needed a I guess you call it, not quite an overhaul, but it needed a maintenance and a sharpening and things like that. And so I asked him to do it, and I said I'd pay him. And so I gave him the chainsaw, didn't think about it. And a few months later, he basically moved away with my chainsaw. I didn't even know he was moving. It's just they more or less disappeared, and with my chainsaw they went. And so, and my wife was a little like, she goes, I thought he was trustworthy. And so she was kind of broken up by the fact that she was stung by it. But she said something very typical. She goes, well, I guess we shouldn't just, trust our neighbors automatically so. And although that is, I think, a common thing, if you get stung, the reaction is, well, I'll change in such a way that never again will this ever happen. So this crave for certainty and security, that if it'll never happen again, if I just never trust again, it's really a shame. That from that point on, when you meet new people, you have to show up in full armor, ready for a fight. Even if they are totally welcoming and mean all the best. And so we need to not try to strive for never being hurt. I mean, some people have problems or difficulty in falling in love and commitment and connection and everything else because they've been hurt, and so they fear ever doing that again. And it's really such a shame, because the world is much, I think, better than most people think. There can be this deep, profound trust in life, world, others in general, without being naive about it, knowing that, yes, at some point I will be stung, but I'm willing to take the sting. I'm willing to take the damage, the harm, whatever happens, so that the other 99 or more will not be, I guess, prejudiced against for what one, person might do. And so it's a different way, I think, of interacting, because if you look at it in terms of interacting with people, if you show up distrusting them, you fear them, you worry them, you wonder what they could do to you, you basically show up in full armor and almost ready to defend yourself if need be. You're inviting the evil, so to speak. You are already showing distrust, and the relationship that's set up will also be distrust. Because of your worry, you'll actually make the other party worry and wonder, well, are you just going to preemptively strike? And then it kind of makes them worry too. However, if you trust upon meeting them, and you're not all armored up and basically looking to, defend yourself, you are inviting the good, so to speak. You're meeting them in such a way that even they can feel safe, because your distrust and armor and worry and ready to go at a drop of a hat and self-defense only puts other people on edge. It makes them feel insecure, and then they need to protect themselves. Distrust breeds more distrust. Mistrust breeds more mistrust. And so trust, I think, is the better spiral to be working on than distrust. And it's not just other people. It's the world in general. It's life in general. But again, if you think about it in terms of as we were growing up, we started out very, very trusting. But then we're taught things like strangers are dangerous. Granted, it is a bit of an evolutionary safeguard, that if you're in your tribe, people that look like, people that look like you, have the same values of you, in your tribe, there's safety. And other tribes pose threats. But we don't live in that kind of tribal society anymore. I mean, in the West, there's at least a veil of civility. there's a bit of order and law, and it's not as bad as it once was, if you think about it. There isn't warring tribes going on. Neighborhoods are not declaring war and fighting other neighborhoods around you. That's just not what's happening anymore. The resources are not so scarce that neighborhoods need to basically invade and try to steal the resources of other neighborhoods in order to survive a winter or things like that. It's not so primitive anymore. And so that mechanism of distrusting anyone outside of a relatively small tribe isn't what's needed anymore. I think we need to become more open in terms of not showing up fully armored, ready for a fight. It can be done more receptively, openly, in terms of relationships. And we don't always have to think the worst of people. In this mistrust that we have, we think the worst of the actions that we see. We immediately think there's an attack or there's something going on. We don't think, our natural default is not to think they're trying to work with us. They're trying to cooperate. That's not the standpoint a lot of people live from. A lot of people are thinking of, how do I minimize my vulnerability? How can I come out fully armored so I can't be damaged in any way? So, it's a different viewpoint. But as children, like I said, we learn this stuff, but of danger of strangers, but that there's not enough of things. It's survival of the fittest. It's the stuff that we're taught, the stuff we learn, has all built this. It's almost going to paranoia, but this strong mistrust and distrust of everything, life, others, could be family, friends, whatever. Something happens and we immediately go to, what are they doing, that could harm me? It's something to delve into, because in non-duality, there's only the self. And as there's only the self, there's no other, no second. And so what are you distrusting other than really yourself? And that's actually a really interesting thing if you delve into it. One of the things we mistrust and distrust the most is also ourselves. We don't trust ourselves. Fundamentally, almost viscerally, what's your response to trusting yourself? There's almost a, what could I do? We need to let go of some of this mistrust. Delve into it, understand it, see where it's coming from. See what the roots are. Are the basic beliefs and concepts that we're playing on still valid? Are they true? It needs to be seen, investigated. But I think it's worth delving into, because fundamentally, in the end, after awakening, enlightenment, pick your label, there is a trust. There is trusting life. There's trusting the self. And at some point, the mistrust and armor is going to have to be let go anyway. Anyways, if you got any questions, comments, please post below. But until next time, thank you much.